Okay, I'm going to tell you one quick thing, and then we're going to get started. So I am the host of a public radio show where we get scientists on and comedians try and guess what they do, and then we interview them about their work. I think that's kind of why they asked me to do this tonight. Before I started doing that, I was a teacher at an elementary school. And so a fun thing is that they sometimes ask me to come back and help out with things. And they recently asked me to come back and help out with a video series on character education, which, if you don't know what it is, it's helping kids to make decisions about what's right and what's wrong. And so what they did is they asked me to come in and make these little videos that would be conversation starters. So I interviewed all of the first graders one by one, and I took them in a room and I said into the camera, what's a time when you did something even though you knew it was wrong? So that would start conversation for the other kids. And we got some amazing responses. So the first kid I interviewed, I said, Matthew, what's a time that you did something even though you knew it was wrong? And he looked at me and he goes, sometimes I get into fights with my enemy. And I was like, okay, who is your enemy? And he goes, my enemy is Vanessa. And I was like, why is Vanessa your enemy? And he goes, she's my enemy because she's in love with me. I was like, okay, I understand. You might not feel like that for the rest of your life, but maybe, that's okay, that's good. But the real best one was this kid named Pierce, this adorable Haitian kid named Pierce. I get Pierce in the room and I say, Pierce, have you ever done something even though you knew it was wrong? And Pierce goes, sometimes when my dad's asleep, I sneak into his bedroom, I take his cell phone, I put in his password, and then I watch TV on his cell phone. And I said, Pierce, do you ever get caught? And like a professional actor, Pierce just turned and hit the camera perfectly, and with this look of ultimate sadness, he just goes, every single time. Never give up, Pierce, never surrender. So when I'm thinking about something tough like conservation and saving the environment, I always think that, like, if I could have a tiny bit of the grit that Pierce shows every single night, maybe we can make a difference. So I hope that we can take that with us into this event tonight. So the first person who I'm going to introduce to you is just a wonderful, incredible artist. She is one of the organizers of this event tonight. She is a National Geographic, let me make sure I say this totally right, a National Geographic emerging explorer. She has given talks all over the country. She made a 3-foot-tall Fabergé egg that was auctioned off to help raise money for the environment. She did a video series about ivory that showed in Times Square that more than 1.5 million people saw. So she's really making this incredible impact and doing some fantastic art, and you're going to hear from her right now.
So I'm a creative conservationist, which basically means that I lend a creative voice to aid conservation agendas around the world. I really believe in what we can achieve when we all come together, because it's not that one person can have impact in and of themselves. It's only when there's a collaborative effort and there's a level of coexistence that's promoted through our work that we achieve something much larger than ourselves. And my basic understanding is that wild has been an implicit part of our evolution and our biological development. It's what has gotten us to our upright stance right now, and to basically not validate our own path and our own right to get to this point in time by destroying that which has made us who we are, which is wild, is utterly disrespectful to ourselves. It's just us lacking awareness about our immensity, what we really stand for as human beings. And that brings me to how I started doing what I'm doing at present. I actually come from a fashion designing background, and I went to Parsons School of Design. But then when the BP oil spill happened, I couldn't help but care so much. I was just sobbing in my bed, days on end. This happened for a whole month, and I realized I needed to stop part-timing conservation and really get on board. And so I took the first train out to DC, and right before I left, a whole series of artworks just poured out of me. So even though I'm not formally trained as a graphic designer, some artworks just came out because I had this deep need to visualize what was happening around me so that I could communicate to myself the core of the issues that I was deliberating. And in doing so, I realized I had this particular skill set of condensing information into really simple two-dimensional layouts with the minimal amount of colors, contrasting positive space and negative space, just to elucidate to yet another person what was happening, that we were fueling life essentially with death. And that's what we've evolved into. So that's the true nature of a fossil fuel. So it's like, unless you can communicate the basic truths of our time in the simplest way possible, people are never going to look at the issues at hand. And if you can't look at it, you're not going to own the problem, and therefore you'll never feel compelled to get a solution for it. So when I created these two images, for the first time people were willing to look at the ivory trade, because if you were to look at any pictures or videos of this grisly trade, You can't look at it. I mean, we have failed elephants so badly, so badly. I cannot even underscore this enough. I mean, I've seen elephants roaming about with their faces like carved into, because poachers hack into them, take their trunks away, and hack with axes into their faces while they're still conscious for the whole thing. I actually have sound recordings, one of which that I scored the billboard in Times Square with, where you hear the elephants groaning and mourning, and they're literally like up until the last moment. This is the thing I love about animals. Up until the last moment, they're giving us the opportunity to do one better, to be a better human being, to be a better individual. And we fail them repeatedly. They're looking in your eye, making eye contact up until the last moment. And I've seen this time and again. And every time we betray that, we're betraying our humanity, we're betraying the values that we could stand for. And that is something that is so tragic of our times, and we should not condone that. So every fight, I don't see it just as a fight for wildlife, because it's a fight for us. We're losing who we are, and what we stand for, and what we could stand for. And so it started off with just this, and now I'm involved across the board with every possible form of animal that is being traded or exploited for any reason. Mostly because it's driven by bottom lines and people who don't seem to get the larger picture, that life is connected, it cannot just be plugged in and plugged out, and you can't just curate an ecosystem, because that's a larger framework that's intrinsically and intricately connected. And when you start pulling things apart, you're pulling the entire tapestry apart. And it's not just about the fact that we're threatening their security and their future, it's also our security that's at risk. And with the ivory trade and rhino horn especially, it's also funding terror groups across Africa in various nations. The Al-Shabaab, they just made a threat. If you've been following the CNN news, it's like they just made a threat in the Mall of America. So ivory directly funds terrorism. And every time people buy an ivory anything, whether it's a curio or a statue or as an art investment, what they're effectively doing is funding failing states, basically creating an entire global economic structure that's going to fail us. And that's not viable. So it's not just about, elephants that are at stake, which, by the way, we're losing an elephant every 15 minutes. So over the course of this evening, we've already lost an irreplaceable amount of elephants. And when we're talking about elephants being lost, it's not just about the individuals that are being lost. The entire society, the family structure of elephant is being lost. Because right now what you're seeing when you go on safari as a tourist is basically elephants that have no context. It's teenage mothers that have gotten pregnant, don't know what to do with their kids, and they don't have the matriarch, the grandmother, the great-grandmother to tell them where they need to migrate, where the resources are. They have no information. They don't know how to be an elephant anymore. So we've taken away the very essence of the animal, and now we're just still going out there and taking photographs of what is just hollow shells of what an elephant once was 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Disintegration of family values, and these calves, these orphans that are left behind as a result. And there are numerous organizations that are taking the calves in and rehabilitating them, but none of them have effectively been reintroduced into the wild. So although they grow up to be adult elephants, they're sort of in this buffer zone that is never like part of the extensive ecosystem. And so when I work on my issues, I realize, time and again, it's not just about the individual species or even the individual within the species, all of which do affect me and trouble me, but it's also about the larger understanding of the ecosystem itself. And time and again, with every issue, what we result in is the destruction of the habitat itself. For instance, in Tanzania alone, we're losing 400,000 acres every year just to the charcoal trade. And to put this in perspective, over 80% of the households, actually it's closer to 90% of the households in Tanzania live off-grid. So they have no access to energy apart from charcoal. So the only way for them to get charcoal is to clear those forest areas, which means there's habitat loss for cheetahs and other big like animals such as elephants and lions and anything else that requires a large territory or range to exist, no longer has the space to be. So loads of places, loads of national parks have lost cheetahs altogether because it's not sustainable for them. They don't thrive in that environment anymore. So we're losing species also because we're losing habitat. And then there's infrastructure growth, and if we're looking at population growth, which is the most unsustainable aspect of us, of humanity, is right now in Tanzania alone, we have 12 million. With the current reproductive fertility rates, we're going to be at 200 million in 10 years. Where is the 200 million going to live? Every time there's another human being, there's more wild that's going to be lost, because we have to prioritize us, because that's how it works. That's our survival instinct kicking in. So when we have kids, that's what we're doing. We're basically saying no to an elephant, no to a rhino, no to forest land, because we need more of us. And that's something we should be thinking about morally and consciously in this generation. We can no longer afford to just have kids without thinking. So every project I get asked to do, everything I get involved in, invariably circles back into this focus on wildlife conservation. This particular project was for the Fabergé Big Egg Hunt. They wanted me to create an egg that would speak to my focus, and so I created the Eye Storm Egg, which is the Sandy hurricane. So if you squint at it, you see the satellite image is the eye of the storm with the radial arms. And I replaced all of that with composite imagery of eyes from all around the world of various species. So now I'm trying to work to get this activated with optical equipment and also with bioacoustics, so we bring the space alive in a much bigger way to show people what we're losing. Focus on our own backyard. So it's easy to say, we need to step up and protect an elephant when we're culling wolves left, right, and center within our own country. And it's shocking the state in which wilderness is not being protected in our own area, in our own country. And it's, right now when I went and talked, this was about trapping, and trapping is completely undiscerning, because the amount of animals that are not targeted, that are caught in those traps and die miserable deaths, bald eagles, literally everything, owls, there are predators that get caught repeatedly. And all these animals, once they get caught in it, cannot thrive in the wild anymore. They lose a foot, they chew through their own feet, and then they die of blood loss after. I mean, it's horrific. It's a horrific level of cruelty, and our violence footprint is so enormous in this day and age. The hatred in the world, the amount of anger in this world. There's a level of unrest that we're just condoning, and I don't understand why, because this conversation is about us. It's not about wildlife. I mean, wildlife preservation in this day and age is the largest, most pressing humanitarian concern, and it's not being prioritized. And that means we're not prioritizing ourselves. So that, in a nutshell, is why I do what I do. When people come up to me, they're like, you lend a voice to the voiceless. They have a voice. And all of my work shows the animals looking back at you. It's just that we're not listening, we're not paying attention, we're not looking. If you take a moment to listen to any animal, it's communicating to you. There's not been a single time when I've gone diving or anything where I've not felt connected to the animals in and around that area. Some of you may not even have seen any of these animals in the wild. But that's the state we're living in. Doesn't mean you shouldn't care.
Okay then, so I'm going to be relatively brief because I'm a filmmaker, so I'm going to show you some film. So actually we're going to watch an exclusive clip of our film Planetary, which we're releasing next week. No one's actually seen this clip yet, so this is the first time it will be shown. It's 8 minutes long. And it's about two astronauts talking about themselves going into space and seeing the Earth for the first time. And our short film overview was on that subject matter, and this clip sort of picks up on that. And then we can talk about it afterwards. And then I'm going to show you the trailer. Actually, before that, I'll show you the trailer for Planetary first. So I'm going to show you all that stuff, and then we can talk about the subject matter of it afterwards. Okay then.
I think the first time we got that picture of the Earth, we were seeing our home in a much bigger context. It was no longer, the house we lived in or the village or the country. Suddenly we were seeing this is home.
I was looking down at the space station against the backdrop of this incredibly beautiful, peaceful, fragile planet from space, and it took my breath away. I was filled with awe.
We are traversing a terrain which we, as a species and as a planet overall, have not seen before.
Scientists have finally proven it to be true, something that philosophers have always hoped to be true, and that is the fact that we're all literally brothers and sisters. We're all cut from the same genetic cloth.
What the world looks like is going to depend on what we do in the next few years. Everything's up for grabs now.
The really wonderful thing that happened to me when I was in space was this feeling of belonging to the entire universe.
We have been gifted with this extraordinarily magnificent planet. That gift takes a lifetime to understand, and even then, we're in the face of mystery.
So I think both of your work gets at this question. Do you think that art can lead to direct action, or does it just raise awareness?
I think earlier when I first started out, I was focused on raising awareness, and education is a huge part of it because a lot of people don't know the very basic things. And even when we ran the Ivory campaign in Times Square, there were numerous tourists who came up to me, and the opening line of the campaign is "Ivory lasts forever," and then the second line is "Service extinction." And the number of people who came up to me and asked me, "What is ivory?" And so I was like, clearly a need for awareness and education, and that's definitely something that has helped numerous people who didn't know, including kids, connect to these issues. But of late, I'm very kind of connected to the idea of direct action and a call to action. So usually when I create a campaign or an image, I ask for people to do something at the end of that, or how can they get involved, or what can they do next? Because that's something, even at the end of my talks, people ask me that. So people do want to help, but don't know how.
Guy, what do you think?
Well, I mean, for me, I think the big issue that we face is we're asking people to change systems, right, and to change behaviours. But one thing that is absolutely paramount is to change our worldview as well, or in some ways to return back to a worldview that we had maybe when we were younger. I mean, worldview is the kind of operating system that allows us to behave in the way that we behave. And so, you know, at Planetary Collective, our main focus is on presenting people with a worldview that's basically more attractive than the one that we're walking about with, the one that's on the screens that surround us, whether it's on our phones or on the metro or in Times Square. And so I think
unless it's Ash's work in Times Square.
Yeah, unless it's Ash's work, of course. Yeah, unless it's work like this. But I think we're walking around with this kind of myopic worldview where we believe and imagine ourselves to be separate from each other, separate from the biosphere, separate from the larger cosmos. And that sense of separation is really the thing that's causing, some of the terrible ecological and social crises that we face. So I'm really interested, especially here tonight, looking at some of the artwork, art that's able to shift people's worldview. You know, Ash's work's a perfect example of it. That when you look at these images, and suddenly you think, how do I think about things?
And if I could just interject, today I just gave an interview and they asked me this question but a slightly different way. And they said, do you think it has to start with the individual? And I completely think it does have to, because even with me, it's a constant self-work. It's a process of addressing you. And unless you evolve, unless you become more inclusive, unless you learn to love and learn to exercise compassion and connection towards other beings, and it starts from there. It starts right here. And if you can't look within yourself, you're not going to emanate anything. And the reason why the world is in such tumult is because we're not extending ourselves beyond our selfish bubbles. And we are so hurting and so violent to ourselves. We want to meditate now. It has to happen now. That's not how meditation works. I want to be compassionate now. I have to make time for it in this next second. This level of coercion is so second nature to us that we don't even understand the ways in which we're perpetuating that. We want everything to fit into these timelines, into these linear ways of functioning, and that's not the world. The world is so much bigger, and you just have to let it flow and not be such control freaks. But we're so programmed to be that way because we're so afraid of letting go, and we're so driven by fear that we don't know how to live anymore, and we don't live holistically, we don't live fully, and that inherently ties into why we perpetuate these paradigms at play that are failing us regularly, because we're failing ourselves anyway, individually, and that's the collective impact of that.
Yeah, and I think to pick up on one point there, I think in terms of the environmental movement, one thing that I think we need to kind of start with the first point of contact to be a sense of awe and wonder, right? And that's the sort of ground from which everything arises. Because if you have a sense of awe and wonder at our world, right, at the planet that we're part of, that's a great introduction to then imagine how do we then change some of the things that we want to change. And so I think, to pick up on the point about art, I think art is the window into awe.
Yeah.
And so the environmental movement needs that in a major way.
It seems like there's often this problem in the environmental movement of preaching to the choir, of how do you reach people who aren't already convinced. And I think in a really interesting way, George Carlin said that when someone laughs, their defenses are down and you can plant a new idea. And it might not be through laughter, but through beauty or through awe. Both of you are really working with that same idea, getting it so that people are engaged with you before the message side is there, and then putting the message in as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think, that's one of the reasons why we contacted you, but also I've noticed time and again, even when presenting a serious issue, and since the facts are so depressing and so overwhelming, and you feel quite helpless at the end of hearing all of it at once in one sitting, especially, you want to find a way to connect to it, but if it gets overbearing, then you just want to dissociate and get off from that situation of being cornered into caring. So I think I have used humor time and again, and one of the things I do say to put the elephant loss in perspective, for instance, is that we're losing an elephant every 15 minutes, which has come to affect my dating life, because when I go on a date with a stranger, and by the time we get to dessert, all I'm thinking about is the fact that we lost an elephant every 15 minutes, and this guy worked 6 elephants. Really, he's not. And that fact registers a whole lot better when you put it in that perspective than if I were to just come and tell you you're losing an elephant every 15 minutes. So I think that way people laugh, but they also care. And I've had people come up to me, especially after doing stand-up comedy, comedians who didn't know, or audiences that had absolutely no clue about these issues, come up to me and they're like, oh my God, are we really losing elephants? Are we really having an overfishing problem? And I think so humor does help enormously. And that's what I said, I love the idea of being creative, or the idea of art can assume any form that you can think of, and you can connect with people in so many ways. So I don't know why people limit themselves. There's no cap to what you can do and what you can be and how you can connect. And not enough people are having enough fun and doing everything they possibly can to enrich each other's lives, let alone the world at large,
This is also a non sequitur, but my OkCupid profile about me is worth 7 elephants. So that's just a weird point. I asked some of my former students if they had any questions for the two of you, and so I got a couple of those ones. First one was more of a factual question. Let's see if you can answer this. One of the kids wants to know, if you added up all the human tongues and all the whale tongues on the planet, which would weigh more?
Crap, that's on you.
That may not be answerable.
Yeah, I actually have no idea.
Yeah, well, that's something we can all Google afterwards.
Yeah.
Here's a definite answerable one. Another one of the kids wanted to know, what were you like as a kid?
I grew up in the UK, and I grew up in a city called Bristol, and we have a really fabulous museum, the Bristol Museum. And I don't know if you know, we have an artist called Banksy, who's quite famous out here. And he took over the Bristol Museum, and he actually went to the school down the road from me. My mum knows his mum.
Doesn't no one know who he is?
Well, I can't tell you who she is.
But we know who his mom is.
But I would go to this museum when I was a kid, and I was really, I basically go around and I grab my mum and I say, Mum, look at this. And I'd run off and I'd come back and I'd say, Mum, look at this. And my whole thing was like, look at this. And that's what documentary filmmaking is. I mean, it's just not Mum. It's like, everyone else look at this. And so, I haven't changed since then, basically. I'm in the same mode. And when we started Planetary, when we started 15 years ago when I was 15, my buddy Steve and I, we read a book that was this phenomenal book called The Awakening Earth that was published in '82, subsequently went out of print. And
that's by Peter Russell.
Yeah, Peter Russell. It's out of print, it's actually difficult to get hold of. It was published here as The Global Brain Awakens, but basically what it was a British physicist, and he kind of painted this picture of the universe. It was what they call big history now. So starting at the beginning of the universe, going through cosmological, biological, human evolution. And at the beginning of the book opened with an astronaut talking about their experience from space. And so we read this stuff and we were like, this is amazing. Like, we're not being taught this at school. So we we bought loads of copies of this book, which we could buy for like $1 at used bookshops. And we went down the skate park and we said to our friends, we were like, you can get high off this book. You've got to read it, right? No one read the book. So we said, let's make a film. So that's what we've done. So it's been a bit of a journey. The last 15 years have been preoccupied with making this film and we use astronauts as sort of Trojan horses to smuggle some of these ideas through, because everyone loves astronauts. And I've been to 38 states in this country. And I haven't met anyone that doesn't, Republican, Democrat alike. And so we found that astronauts they're really underused by the environmental movement to get across some big ideas. We're on a planet, we have planetary limits, we're inseparably linked. It's really beautiful. There's nowhere else to go. Yeah. So we just decided to use astronauts for that, and then we're very, very happy to talk about that.
Yeah, you were telling me before that when you talk to astronauts, they rarely get asked about the beauty part, and they just get asked about the technical parts of but how do you drink water in space? And, is it weird when you sneeze? And those kind of questions. But they rarely get asked about the beauty and the bigger picture questions.
Yeah, in our short film Overview, and if you guys want to watch it, you just Google Overview, it comes up. It's 80 minutes. It's kind of similar subject matter. We talk in the film about this idea of earth gazing, which is astronauts kind of finish their chores. And then they excitedly, like kids, go to the window in the space station, the cupola, and just stare out of it. That's what they do. And they're just in awe. And my friend Ron, who was in the film, he's done 2 different missions. And the second mission he was up for 6 months. And so I said to him, does it ever get boring? And he's like, absolutely not. He said it's like beautiful classical music. The first time you hear it, it's amazing, and it's an experience. But as you keep listening, the kind of beauty just unfolds and becomes multifaceted. So, bizarrely enough, no one talks to astronauts about this. So when we wrote to NASA, I'm not a trained filmmaker. None of there's 3 of us in our collective. And when we wrote to NASA, we thought, NASA's not going to write back to us. And we sent them an email, and that afternoon, they wrote back, and they were like, come down, what do you need? Wow. And when we were down there, we were talking to the other guys that have the permanent news trucks, ABC and CNN and stuff, and they were like, how much time did you give the astronauts? And we were like, they gave us an astronaut for an hour each. And they were like, what? They gave us 10 minutes, and it's because the administration, they've been wanting to talk about this stuff. And the early astronauts could never talk about it. The guys in the 60s, in the 70s, they would have these profound experiences. And NASA would lose contact with them because they were crying, basically. And the culture did not exist to come back down for a test pilot to talk about the beauty of the Earth and how we're connected to it. And so it's a wonderful measure of our culture, of how we've changed, and we've become much more ecologically aware. Because like Chris Hadfield, for example, I don't know if you guys know, the Canadian astronaut, he famously was playing David Bowie in space. We're very receptive to that now. So in a way, it's kind of a good measure of ecological success or ecological cultural success.
And Asher, what about you? What were you like as a kid?
I actually went through an interesting phase where I thought it was different animals, and my mum never corrected me.
You thought you were different animals?
Yeah, and my mum never corrected me. This was when I was really young. And it was not until I was in kindergarten and I had a teacher come up to me and tell me that I can't bond with my classmates by grooming them, that I realized I was a human and I couldn't just be a chimp because I thought I was. And it's funny when you realize that separation for the first time, that you're not those things and you can't be those things because that's not the way the world perceives you. I went back crying home and I told my mum, I'm like, Mum, I'm not a chimp. And she's like, you can be a chimp whenever you recognize that in you. She's like, you can always be a bat. And I used to be a bat before that. Also, I used to have fangs. I got them shaped, these are veneers. But before that I thought I was a bat, and I used to hang upside down from various surfaces and drove my family crazy. You can see why they kicked me out early in life. But I genuinely went through these phases when I thought I was different things. And even now, to date, I have extreme animal envy. No matter what creature it is. The moment I connect, it's that awe and wonder. The minute I see it and I'm like, holy crap, why don't I have blue scales? Why don't I have that giant tongue? Why am I not covered in patches? We're so limited. We can be so much more beautiful. We wanted to connect to all of those things, and we chose to be a chimp every once in a while, but we choose not to be. And I'm not furry. I don't have UV vision. I have nothing going for me. I honestly am the most limited individual on Earth, and I'm constantly wishing I could be a bee. I could be something. So when I connect to these animals, I genuinely see their potential, and I see parts of me, this magic, this alien world that I would otherwise have absolutely no access to. And they're amazing. Like the lions, the most incredible experience I've ever had. I mean, there's 2 different lion stories, but the one that I would say in terms of how you connect to an animal was when we went to study this group of lions with the Lion Project. I was out in the field, and for those of you who don't know, the one way in which if you ever encounter a lion, to make it feel at peace, you consciously lock eye contact with this big cat, and it works with leopards, with all big cats, yeah? If you lock eyes with the big cat and consciously blink and open, it registers with the cat, and the cat imitates you. And for that one moment you realize you and the cat are doing the exact same motion, and after that it just completely eases off. It's no longer threatened by your presence there, and it knows that you're there in your own regard. So,
I would be dead instantly. There's no chance that I would remember that in the moment. I would just lie down and let it keep me.
But yeah,
I'm glad that everyone else.
What I was as a kid is why I do what I do, because I always feel this connection to wildlife and animals and other beings.
Yeah, it seems like both of you have this long-standing passion that you've kind of always known that this was the type of thing that you wanted to do. Well, let's take some questions that we got from audience members. Okay, a lot of the cards just say, "Why are you all so attractive?"
Single?
Are you single? I'm not going to ask us that. Here's one. For you guys, ideally, what would you like to see happen after the film is released?
Well, I guess there's a sort of twofold answer to that. With Overview, with our short film, we were really interested in getting this idea out, the overview effect, when this idea of astronauts seeing the Earth from space, and having this kind of transformation in awareness. So what we did is we monitored the hashtag Overview and Overview effect a year before we released the film. And then when the film was released, and we released it on the 40th anniversary of the Blue Marble picture, December 2012, we were able to follow that meme spreading, so the hashtag Overview, and it spread, like wildfire. Like I said, we had, we've now had nearly 7 million views on Vimeo. And it was interesting because it was picked up by so many different groups. So we had people we had Pharrell, who blogged about us, we had Richard Branson, and the kind of high profile guys. High Times, Stoners loved it.
That does not surprise me.
Major hit.
And pun intended.
But also church groups. So we had stoners and church groups and musicians, and kind of it was really interesting to see that idea because it is universal, right? Like we all share the same planet. So with Planetary, Planetary goes a bit further. And it looks at how we're really embedded in the larger biosystems, and also how we actually can identify as planetary. So you don't lose any of your identity, you just gain. And so for us, that's the that's the idea that we want to spread, that we are planetary. And so that's that's the main idea of the film.
And Asher, it seems like a lot of your work, you've tried to target groups that may not even speak the same language as you. So for example, you've done a lot of work trying to affect behavior change in China. And as a visual artist, certainly that transcends language in a lot of ways. How does that affect your creation process or the process of watching your work be received?
I think usually when I get commissioned for a campaign, I have to be conscious of the culture that I'm addressing. And so when I first created there's 2 artworks that I show here called Pandas of Africa, and I re-visualized the elephant and rhino as pandas so that the Chinese would connect to these animals. Because they're so proud of the conservation success they've achieved in their country. For those 2 species, for the panda, they are capable of extending that empathy and pride to other species in other parts of the world that they're actively exploiting. And this went viral, because especially in the way in which I illustrated it was as an anime character, and that's just the way they received that messaging. And so I'm very conscious of the markets in which we're trying to address the content that needs to get disseminated, and in fact with the color palette as well. Initially when I visualized that image, I had done it with bright red, and they told me that that's actually associated with good fortune. So it's yay, we're killing the panda elephant, yay, we're killing the panda rhino, as opposed to no, this is not okay, and we should be doing it as a successful conservation strategy going forward. So I had to change that to a deep maroon. So there's small adjustments that I get from the field once I start conceptualizing the campaign. They tell me what I should step back on. So yeah, I work back and forth on that dialogue. But yeah, once you get that contextualized, it definitely has impact because it's made for that specific audience, and that's something I'm consciously aware of when I produce my content.
I'm curious. Well, let's get another question from the audience so far. So another question here is, both of you have this idea of raising awareness and expanding your perspective, whether it's empathizing with animals or visualizing the earth as a whole. So this question is that certain shamanic plants and also hallucinogens can expand people's perspectives as well and change people, give people life-changing experiences. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sorry, I have to tap in that to answer my question.
Sure.
I have to say, literally what I experienced, and this is beautiful, I do astral projection, where I literally leave my body and I travel and I can see the universe operating, and it's such what's experiencing, and it's sustainable because it costs nothing. How much does a rocket ship cost to put into space? That hurts how many animals, the fuel, the plant is growing out of the ground. And what I'm experiencing is what those guys are experiencing. I'm crying listening to you guys talk. And that's it. I just want your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely pick up on something there. So, I mean, some of the people that we talked to when we made Planetary, and they're featured in Planetary are, what are loosely called in the West indigenous people. So we were very fortunate to spend time with people from the Hopi and the Havasupai down around in the southwest, and with the Lakota, and with the Kogi Mamos, who are down in Colombia, who are this absolutely incredible people that live in the mountains there. And also in West Africa with Dagara people, a wonderful woman called Sabonfu Sameh. And also in Tibet as well, in East Tibet. And what we found, there is a kind of perennial understanding of our embeddedness within the larger whole. And definitely some of those traditions use plant medicine as well, especially those in the Amazon, but also here in North America as well. So I do think that there is definitely different ways to understand our embeddedness, and there's different means to get there. I think one of the really powerful means that we have now in our culture and what we value is the natural sciences. Because the natural sciences are pointing to our embeddedness and our interconnectedness. The science of ecology, for example. I mean, that it's about relatedness. So I think one of the things that in some regards, it's something that we really need to emphasize, is to look at ourselves as interdependent through the lens of the natural sciences.
Okay, so I'm going to have an interesting answer, mostly because I've never done drugs. I don't believe in doing drugs, and I know different people have different opinions on that. But for me personally, I don't think it would work for me because I'm already so out of orbit and so crazy. I see in color. I see I have such a weird, vivid reality that I live in, and I'm not kidding. I walk down Fifth Avenue and I'm seeing the galaxies above me. So it's I really am in a weird, different space, in a tangential dimension sometimes, and I see patterns and colors more vividly, and all of that translates into the visual work I do. So I have a pretty trippy life, and the only time I've done anything, was just a blunt, and I remember being so weighed down by it. And it was an artificial way of me simulating that which came to me naturally. And so for me, it's I've always felt this electric connection to life, and I feel it on a cellular level, and I'm so energized by just walking out in the morning and seeing a bunch of squirrels running around, and that's amazing to me, that life can just do that, and if you just have this level of awe and wonder for every single thing that life shows you, and you're really present for that moment, when a sparrow just takes off, when a pigeon comes walking toward you and strutting and pushing its chest forward, that's so hot, but it's just incredible what nature can do, and if you're just there for that moment and truly connected to that moment, you don't need anything more to connect to all life, because it starts there and it percolates through and through. And so for me, I have this inherent high that I live on every minute of every day, and I'm constantly glowing and smiling and just resonating with the pulse of life. And so I think that just comes from truly appreciating.
It's epigenetic in your genes. Your ancestors did this, and it's still in your genes, and it hasn't been taken out of you yet. It's epigenetic.
I think we're going to stick to... no problem. I think we're just going to stick to note cards for the time being. So another question for you both is, I think there's obviously an and I think we're touching on it now too, there's obviously a spiritual element to your work, and you studied Buddhism, and certainly the idea of animals and plants and the earth being interconnected. Where do you feel like the line between science and the unknowable plays into all of this?
I feel like you're going to give a far more pointed answer considering your education.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, I studied Buddhism academically to start with, and then I ended up through that actually practicing in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and I mean, there's some really interesting stuff going on with an institute called Mind and Life, which the Dalai Lama started actually about 20 years ago. And it was originally about the intersection between neuroscience and meditation. So they were getting meditators to basically stick EEG machines and stuff to monitor brain activity, see what was going on. And what's really fascinating, I mean, they have this conference every year in Dharamsala where His Holiness Dalai Lama lives. And now it's expanded, and there's cosmologists that come, and there's ecologists and all sorts of different scientists, and they're having this conversation back and forth. And the limits of the unknowable are really fascinating. I mean, there's a great chap called Mathieu Ricard. He's a French. He was actually a French biochemist who was working under a Nobel Prize-winning chemist, and he ended up leaving it behind and becoming a Buddhist monk. But because of his scientific training, he's been a great bridge between those between that conversation, those two worlds. And he's quote unquote the happiest man on earth, because they put all this stuff on his head, and they monitored him meditating, and they were all like, "This is impossible. This is and this is where the ideas of like neuroplasticity, which is more and more people are learning about." He has 2 really great TED Talks, if anyone's interested to learn about it. But what's interesting
who else has a great TED Talk? Asher J.
Asher J. Right. So I mean, I think the thing is that we've come at it from this perspective that we as Westerners, we kind of know everything, and I'm a great believer in the natural sciences and how important they are. But I do think that once we can get over this kind of this arrogance and hubris that's kind of come with our culture and look to other traditions, then I think that we'll find that what we think is unknowable will radically change. And like I said, with certain things like Mind and Life, that's really starting to happen. And I think there's so many other avenues to go down, especially around indigenous traditions.
For me, I think the 2 words that I grew up with most from my mother was ego laxative. She's like, you need to take an ego laxative. So every time I got sent to the corner, it was for that reason. And so she was like, because we tend to be such pity parties. Like, we want to make it all about ourselves. Oh, me, woe's me. And it's so easy to get trapped in that self-perpetuating bubble and not ever think beyond that. And a lot of the times, even when I'm creating work, like if I feel like maybe I won't deliver on it, that's still the ego. That still is about maybe the I comes in. And I think off late I've been focusing a lot, like I've been just meditating and stuff, and it's phenomenal. I mean, you can hear about these things, you hear about yoga, it's trending, hashtag yoga, hashtag, meditation, and it's always like these things that are happening in culture and people are talking about it, but till you really give it a shot and you sit still and you see this whole space come to life with just breath, and you know what it means to breathe, to be aware in that moment of each breath that you draw in and out. That's a huge gift, to be aware of your breath. And we're so busy running back and forth on our timelines that we're not even aware of the larger picture at play, because we're not connected to the single breath that we draw in and out. We take that for granted. We take our lives for granted, so we take other lives for granted. So I think for me, the spiritual understanding and the not knowing is a huge part of who I am. My mum has always told me I know very little. And oftentimes, even before I go in front of an audience, I never feel like I know anything, that I have anything to offer. But like, it pours out of me, because it's something that's larger than me, that channels me, and it comes out. And I seldom can repeat a talk simply because I don't even know what's going to come out of my mouth till I get up in front of the audience. And then it just happens. And then I'm like, holy crap, I hope I said something relevant, like I don't even know what happens. It's like I get possessed. And the same thing with the art too, is like I get possessed by something much larger than me, and then it comes out. And then I feel like something has happened, and then it's like out of me and I'm done. But like, I don't know quite where all of those ideas come together. So I don't really take a lot of credit, because there's something so much larger working through us. Yeah. And we should be acknowledging that, as opposed to constantly honing in about ourselves, right? So.
I have that same feeling of sometimes just words spewing out of me and not knowing what's happening, but people never ask me back afterwards. So you must be doing a better job. So we have one final question, and then we're going to have just a couple of quick thank yous and a little bit of information about this. First of all, thank you so much for spending your time with us tonight and for making the effort to come out on a cold night and see some beautiful art and hear people talk. And we really, really appreciate that. And I think along those lines, you have this audience of people who are here who want to hear what you're saying. What's something that we can all do as people who are wanting to be active and make a change? What should we do after we leave this room?
Well, I was, people inevitably with a film, that has environmental, social issues, people always say, what is it you want people to do after you see the film? So I think it's a similar kind of situation. And the one thing that I think is so important is actually very simple but profound, and that's to reconsider. The word "consider" is a really fascinating word. It comes from the Latin "considere," which means to be with the stars. And I don't know if you guys have. I mean, it's difficult in New York. It's certainly difficult in London to actually see the stars. But if you go down to the southwest or even upstate, and you're actually with the stars, a feeling arises, and it kind of it certainly happens to everyone that I know. And that feeling is a feeling that's really profound. And I think it's what Asher was talking about stepping back and allowing a space to open. And so, I think that the time that we find ourselves in at the moment as a species, the thing that we really need to do is to reconsider what we're doing. And if we can bring that feeling into everyday decisions, even when we wake up and we have a bowl of granola in the morning, and we look at that granola, we can be exactly the same as those astronauts, looking down at the planet, looking into a bowl of granola. I mean, maybe this picks up on the drug point. I mean, because if you get high, it's a whole different story. But if you do look at a bowl of granola in that lens, you can actually see the whole world. Literally just take the ingredients and find out where everything comes from. And so I think if we can open up that space a bit more, I think profound things can happen, because everyone has a unique way of approaching life. And if they approach it with that in mind, then whether you work in, water or you work in finance, things are going to change because of that.
The one word I would leave you with is responsibility. Because I think everything I have done is simply because I feel responsible for it. And the minute you feel responsible, you take it upon yourself. And you will find the solution through you. Because the one thing that is true is that there's only one of you. There's nobody else who can be you. All the experiences you've endured, everything that has shaped you so exquisitely to be you. That's phenomenal. And you have a unique voice and a unique capacity to influence this world. Every breath you draw impacts the world around you. And it's up to you to grow aware of that impact and then realize the impacts that are negative and turn them into positives. It's so simple. It's just anchoring yourself to you completely and taking responsibility as far as possible. The responsibility only ends where you choose to end it. It's where your ignorance starts, where you choose to disengage. I mean, the only reason I can do what I can do is because one morning I woke up and I was like, what's happening in Taiji, Japan, that's on me. The fact that they're slaughtering thousands of dolphins and then shipping the dolphins that they do keep alive to aquariums and dolphinariums to show them around in the circus act, which is not even educational, that's on me. That's the world I'm condoning. That's on me completely. And I feel responsible for every elephant that dies. I feel responsible for every rhino that dies, every animal, for every person. I just watched a movie called The Good Lie. You guys should definitely watch that. It has Reese Witherspoon. But it's a mainstream movie, but it's about the Sudanese refugees, about the lost boys. And now I feel responsible for all the people who are displaced. And I can definitely do something within my lifetime for all those people. I can definitely do something within my day tomorrow for the next anything. It's just waking up. And one of the most beautiful things I've realized is that every morning when I wake up, the whole day is open for me to do anything. And it's up to you. You choose actively to sculpt your day, sculpt the world, sculpt people around you, sculpt life. So choose wisely, take responsibility and act one better based on what you know today.
Thank you very much. Please stick around for just a couple more moments. First, there's a couple words from the director of the Unseen Art Show. So please give him a round of applause.
My name is John Oliva. I am the assistant director of the Unseen, and I just want to thank you so much, and thank you so much. It's such a passionate response about very important issues that are happening. And what we want to deal with here with the unseen is to deal with the cultural landscape, the passionate responses of the artists to what is happening in the art market, in the art world in this particular week of the Armory Show, dealing with the very high-end figures and somewhat, in some cases, ignoring the passion and the excellence of the artist. And what we want to do here is juxtapose perhaps 17th century old masters like Francois Moreau against contemporary, very passionate artist Risa Blattman, who has depicted Trouble in Paradise. You can see a broken landscape with plastic, plants pouring out of a doorway. And we just ask you to feel this juxtaposition as you explore our show, and perhaps if you are inspired, come back tomorrow. We have performances in this very space. It is free to the public if you wish to visit. And of course, our very generous sponsors, Ben & Jerry's, have a freezer packed to the gills in the next room, so please enjoy that tonight. And if you choose to come back tomorrow, there's many more cookie dough, strawberry cheesecake, and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Words about this venue. So this whole evening came about because I just do this thing of cold calling and hitting up people that I feel connected to, and I reached out to Michael, who helped curate this entire space, and I told him, I was like, it seems like what you stand for is very congruous to what I do and what I care about. So if you want to keep me in mind for the future, this is what I do, and I sent him my work, and I always do this. I send things to people hoping it'll land on them in some way. And he wrote me back immediately, and he's like, I want to meet you, maybe you can do something right now. And I'm like, holy crap, I have a travel schedule, I have all these things going on. But the thing with my life is I don't know how to say no yet, and I'm learning that. So hopefully soon I'll start saying it. But I said yes, and thanks to the amazing support of Jen Seeger, who helped pull this together. She's my movie on board partner. This whole thing came about, in 10 days. We managed to secure everything, including the seats you're sitting on and all of this. It takes such a lot to put an event together, and she helped me pull it off. And I was like, this is the thing. I mean, I couldn't be me, and I couldn't do what I do, and I'm sure Guy would agree, and so would Chris. It's like, we can't do what we do without the support of the people in our lives. And I have tremendous support from not just the Unseen Art Show that got on board, Michael and Abby from the production team, and also my partner, Blue Beyond Borders, but also just generally friends, family, everyone supports such events coming together. All of you coming here tonight, taking the time to listen to us. Thank you so much for being here. This is extraordinary, and we're so happy to have you here.
Could I just say as well, if you guys are interested as well at seeing the full length of Planetary, we're doing a global release on Earth Day, April 22nd, with Vimeo, who's our main partner. If anyone's going to be at South by, we're at the Vimeo Theatre on the 17th at South by. But if you're here in New York and you want to come, you can go to weareplanetary.com, and it's going to be absolutely amazing. So if you guys want to come, weareplanetary.com, and that's the same as our Twitter.
And I would also highly recommend that you guys watch Overview, because the other thing is also, this event was just supposed to be me showcasing my work. That's how it started out. And then his friend Danielle asked me to look up his movie Overview and just consider having him with me. And the minute I played that movie, I was just like, that's it. I absolutely had to have him on board. And if you saw the trailer and the clips that you liked this evening, that movie just gave me the goosebumps, through and through. And to see the planet and to really rejoice in what this planet stands for and has to offer, and the fact that it sustains all of us, totally inspired me to bring him on board. And I highly commend watching his movie.
I just want to say thank you to those of you who came out. I recognize some of you from previous Blue Beyond Borders events, and other new faces we're happy to have. I hope we see you at future events. If you enjoyed what you saw here tonight, go to our website, join our mailing list, and you'll find out about more events that will showcase such talented artists. And I want to say special thanks to Chris Duffy, our wonderful MC and host of You're the Expert on NPR's Boston affiliate station, WBUR. And if you don't know it, you should check it out, because it's brilliant.
It's great.
And we're just so grateful for you to take the time to host our event.
Thanks.
All right.